It came in the afternoon mail, tucked between a grocery flyer and the electric bill. Just a plain white envelope. No return address. Just my name, Eliza Chandler, written in that stiff, deliberate handwriting I hadn't seen since Jonah was in diapers. I stood by the kitchen sink, fingers resting on the envelope's edge. The house was unusually still for a Thursday. The only sounds were the hum of the neighbor's lawnmower and the low rumble of the dryer tumbling Jonah's soccer uniform. For a long second, I told myself it was probably junk. Maybe a local church outreach or one of those odd fundraiser letters that pop up now and then. But that handwriting, the looped L, the slightly crooked Z, the way the R curved back in Chandler. It hit me harder than I expected. Yesterday, Jonah had looked up from his math homework and asked, "Mom, do you think Grandpa ever missed you?" I hadn't known how to answer. I think I just smiled weakly and changed the subject to meatloaf. Now, this envelope sat in my palm like a ghost. Not heavy, just full. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I put it on the kitchen table, right beside Jonah's half-finished library book and the little county fair flyer someone had pinned to our front porch. The flyer made me smile. Same blue ribbon font, same promise of funnel cakes and old tractors. I tried to distract myself. I wiped the counters. I checked the weather. I even dug out a frozen pecan pie, just to feel normal. But my eyes kept drifting back to that envelope. It had been over 11 years since I'd spoken to my father. 11 years since I left that red brick house in Madisonville in the dead of night, with a baby wrapped in a thrifted quilt and my heart splitting clean down the middle. We had screamed at each other that night. Not in words I want to remember. He didn't approve of my choices. He said I was throwing my life away. I told him he never really knew me anyway. Then I left. And I never looked back until now. I finally slid my thumb under the flap and opened it. Inside was a single folded page. No greeting. No signature. Just 2 sentences, typed on old cream-colored paper. Benjamin Chandler passed away last Sunday. The funeral will be held this Saturday at St. Mark's Baptist Church. No, dear Eliza. No apology. Not even a time. I read the lines 3 times before I felt anything. At first, just a numb flicker, like when your hand brushes a hot pan and you don't feel the burn until moments later. "Mom?" Jonah's voice snapped me back. He stood in the doorway, one sock on, hair still wet from his shower. I quickly folded the letter and slid it under a magazine. He squinted at me. "You okay?" I nodded too fast. "Yeah, just something from the electric company." He didn't look convinced. "What's wrong?" he asked, softer now. I took a breath. "Grandpa passed away." He blinked. "Your dad?" I nodded again. He walked over and leaned on the table, eyes on the letter I had tried to hide. His voice was gentle. "Are you gonna go?" I let out a low laugh. Not bitter, not angry, just tired. "I don't know, honey. I haven't talked to anyone in that family in over a decade." Jonah sat across from me, his knees barely brushing the edge of the chair. "But he was still your dad." I stared at the linoleum floor, noticing how the sunlight slanted across it, picking up dust I hadn't swept. "There are things you don't understand yet," I whispered. Jonah didn't push. He just looked at me the way only a child could, without judgment, just quiet curiosity. "Do you think," he started, hesitating, "do you think he left something behind for you? Not just, like, stuff, but maybe a reason?" I turned toward him, startled. His face was open, hopeful in that way only kids are before life teaches them how messy things can get. It wasn't about the house, or the past fights, or the things unsaid. It was about him, Jonah. Maybe it was time I stopped protecting him from the story and started letting him witness how it ends. I rose, heart thudding, and walked to the hallway closet. There, on the top shelf behind an old Easter wreath and 2 bags of forgotten winter clothes, sat a worn-out suitcase I hadn't touched since college. Brown leather, scuffed edges, and a broken zipper that never stayed shut. I reached up and pulled it down, brushing off a soft layer of dust. From the kitchen, Jonah asked, "You're really going?" I looked down at the suitcase in my hands. Same narrow streets, same red brick storefronts with their chipping white trim, same little cafe on the corner still advertising peach ice cream in faded pink. But somehow, every brick felt colder than I remembered, like time had washed over Lexington without softening a single edge. I tightened my scarf against the autumn wind and glanced at Jonah beside me. He was quiet, studying the stained glass windows of the church with the kind of awe I used to have before everything fractured. We parked around the back lot, where weeds crept along the cracked pavement and the church bell hung silent above us. The chapel door creaked open before I even touched it. People were already inside, voices low, perfume strong, the hush of polite mourning thick in the air. Inside, nothing was warm. The heavy scent of lilies and rose water clung to the wooden pews. Women in lace gloves nodded at one another with practiced sorrow. Men shifted their weight awkwardly, murmuring about casserole rosters and parking spots. No one looked directly at me, but I felt them notice. The whispering started before I took 3 steps. That her. I thought she moved away. Didn't she run off with the baby? Jonah clutched my hand tighter. I leaned down slightly, pressing my shoulder against his. "We're fine," I whispered. "Just sit with me, okay?" He nodded, eyes wide but brave. He was always braver than I gave him credit for. We found a seat near the back, beneath a tall window where the light had dulled behind gathering clouds. I recognized nearly every face in that church, neighbors, cousins, men who once worked at my father's hardware store. But none turned toward me. Not really. Except Harper. She sat in the second pew, spine straight as a fence post, hair tucked in a flawless twist under a black felt hat. She glanced back once, just once, and when her eyes met mine, she didn't blink. She just offered the faintest smirk, like I'd shown up to a party uninvited. Then she turned back around, as if my presence were just another breeze to ignore. Travis, on the other hand, gave me a nod so slight it could have been a muscle twitch. Then he adjusted his tie and looked away, pretending I wasn't there. I looked down at my lap, trying to will the heat out of my face. The pastor began. His voice rang through the chapel, soft and rehearsed. He spoke of Benjamin Chandler as a pillar of this community, a devoted father, and a man of unwavering principles. The words rolled out like marble, smooth, polished, impersonal. He talked about the family legacy, about Harper, who had taken over some small business bookkeeping in town, about Travis, who had stayed close and cared deeply for his father in his final days. He never said my name, not once. He didn't mention that Benjamin had 3 children. Only 2. As if I had vanished from the story entirely. As if I had never existed. I blinked, trying to keep my expression still. But Jonah leaned closer and whispered, "Why didn't he say your name?" I swallowed hard, because sometimes people only remember the parts that make them feel good. The pastor closed with a brief prayer, and then people stood. I stayed seated. My legs didn't want to move. "Come on," I finally whispered to Jonah. "Let's step outside." But just as we rose, a shift rippled through the room. A tall man in a tailored navy coat walked through the doors at the back of the chapel. He carried a polished cedar box with brass accents, held against his chest like something sacred. His shoes tapped slowly against the floorboards as he made his way down the aisle. Heads turned. Conversations hushed. Even Harper twisted around in surprise. He looked vaguely familiar, strong jaw, close-cropped gray hair, eyes like slate. Not family, not local. When he passed our pew, he gave me a slow, deliberate glance. Not cold, not warm, just knowing. He stopped beside the altar and placed the box on the cloth-draped table. Then he turned and nodded at the pastor, who looked caught off guard. Something shifted in the room. People began to murmur again, only this time not about me. Jonah tugged on my coat sleeve. "What's in that box?" "I'm not sure," I whispered, though my heart was already racing. I had no idea who the man was. But something about the weight of that cedar box and the way Harper's expression faltered for the first time all morning told me the story wasn't finished yet. That's the first thing I noticed about the man with the cedar box. While the rest of the room tiptoed around grief, dabbing at their eyes or murmuring in careful tones, this man stood with shoulders squared and voice clear. No tremble, no tears, just purpose. I hadn't seen Howard Kellerman in over a decade, but I recognized him instantly. My father had once called him the only man in Kentucky who can win an argument without raising his voice. He used to come by the house when I was little, never staying long, but always dressed sharp and smelling faintly of cedar and tobacco. And now here he was again, laying that polished box on the center coffee table in the Chandler family parlor, like it held something heavier than wood. The parlor hadn't changed much either. Tall ceilings, mahogany paneling, formal furniture that looked expensive but never quite invited you to sit. The portraits along the wall stared down like silent judges, my father in his prime, Harper in her high school pageant sash, Travis beside a fishing trophy he never earned. I sat near the far end of the room, Jonah at my side, his small hands folded politely in his lap. Harper sat stiffly across from us, legs crossed at the ankle, lips pressed so tight they turned white. Travis leaned against the fireplace mantel, arms crossed, looking bored. And in the corner, nearly swallowed by a tall wingback chair, sat Wallace Boone. He must have been pushing 80 now. A long-retired neighbor from our street back home. I hadn't even noticed him at the funeral. But here he was, watching everything with sharp, steady eyes, absently turning a little tin of mints between his fingers. Kellerman cleared his throat. "Thank you all for staying. I realize today is a difficult day, but your father left specific instructions that must be followed to the letter." Harper scoffed. "Of course he did." Kellerman didn't flinch. He prepared a video message. It must be viewed by all 3 children present before any documentation or division of estate proceeds. "Video?" Travis frowned. "What, like a farewell?" "No," Kellerman said, opening the cedar box. "A directive." The scent hit me the second the lid opened. Cedar are rich and dry. It brought back flashes of afternoons in my father's home office. I used to sit on the rug, coloring with broken crayons while he shuffled papers behind that massive desk of his, the bottom drawer always locked. I used to imagine it held something magical. Apparently, it held this. Kellerman removed a slim black case and a folded envelope from inside. Then he stepped to the sideboard and turned on an old television with a DVD player tucked underneath. The screen blinked to life with a soft whine. "This was recorded 6 weeks before Mr. Chandler's passing," Kellerman said. "I'm sorry, but this is ridiculous," Harper said sharply. "We could be with family, friends. And instead we're watching this." "You're free to leave, Ms. Chandler," Kellerman replied calmly. "But per your father's legal will, Any absence from this viewing forfeits claim to his personal assets. Harper froze. Travis muttered something under his breath that sounded like a curse, but didn't move either. I glanced at Jonah. He didn't understand the stakes, not really, but he was watching all of it, taking mental notes with that quiet mind of his. The screen flickered. At first, just static. Then the image sharpened, and there he was. Benjamin Chandler. He looked older than I remembered. Thinner. The sharp cut of his jaw now softened by age. His eyes, once steely and commanding, seemed almost unsure under the weight of whatever he was about to say. He sat alone in what looked like his study. Same plaid tie, same leather-bound books in the background. He looked straight into the camera, like he could see us. And for a moment, it felt like he did. Jonah leaned forward, whispering, "That's him." I nodded, unable to speak. Benjamin inhaled deeply on screen, then began. "If you're seeing this, it means I've passed." He paused. His hands rested on the arms of the chair, but his fingers tapped once, twice, just like they used to when he was irritated. "I won't pretend I was an easy man," he said. "But I built what I could with what I had. And I leave this to you not out of sentiment, but out of clarity." His tone was matter-of-fact. No apologies. No warmth. Just the way he'd always spoken when something was about to change. Harper folded her arms tighter. Kellerman moved toward the coffee table, placing the printed envelope beside the box, but not touching it further. "I ask that you hear the entire message," Kellerman said, voice low, "before we proceed." And with that, he stepped back. Benjamin Chandler stared out from the screen, silent now, as though measuring what came next. And I could feel it. This wasn't just a will. This was a reckoning. The room went still as the video resumed. My father sat motionless on screen for a long moment, eyes fixed ahead, before speaking again, his voice lower now, quieter. Like he wasn't just speaking into a camera anymore. Like he was speaking to me. "If Eliza's watching this," he said, "it means I finally got brave enough." I didn't realize I'd stopped breathing until Jonah shifted beside me, and I let out a breath that trembled on its way out. Benjamin Chandler leaned forward slightly. His hands clasped in front of him now, his wedding ring still on, catching a glint of light from the window in his office. I recognized the leather chair, the one I wasn't allowed to sit in growing up. "I judged you too harshly," he said. I told myself it was about responsibility, about tradition. But it wasn't. Behind me, someone cleared their throat too loudly, like they needed to break the weight pressing down on us. But the video played on. It was pride, he admitted. "I couldn't understand why you made the choices you did, why you left with the baby, why you refused to live under my roof with no explanation. I didn't ask. I just decided." He looked away for a moment, then back again. "You were protecting your son," he said. "What I should have done for mine. But I didn't." The silence in the room deepened. Travis shifted, his jaw clenched tight. Harper's fingers pinched the edge of her skirt, white at the knuckles. Neither said a word. "I heard things," my father continued. "But I didn't believe them. I heard you were sending money. Quietly. Regularly. Through Wallace." I blinked. Wallace didn't move, just turned that tin of mints in his palm like always. He didn't look at me. He didn't need to. But Wallace told me last spring. Said it was time I knew. Said I should be a man about it. That's when I asked Kellerman to come over. The screen flickered for a second, but the image held. "I had already drafted the original will," my father said. "But I changed it. And no Harper, Travis, no one else knew. That was the point." Jonah leaned into me now, silent, eyes wide. "I want you to have the house, Eliza," he said. "The land. the lake behind it. I don't expect you to move back, but it's yours. Not as a payment. Not as an apology. He paused again, lips pressed tight before his voice dropped. You never stopped being my daughter, even when I stopped being your father. I don't remember closing my eyes. But when I opened them, the room was silent again. The screen had gone dark. No music. No end credits. Just black. For a few seconds, nobody moved. The only sound was the tick of the old clock on the mantel. Then I heard a sharp inhale, a Harper. She was biting her lip hard, but she wouldn't look at me. Travis had both hands clamped around one knee like it was keeping him grounded. Even the relatives lining the back wall looked stunned, some blinking, others exchanging awkward glances. A woman with frosted blonde curls coughed once, too loud, and then quickly looked at her shoes. Kellerman stood slowly. As executor, I will now proceed with the formal reading of the amended will, as instructed in Mr. Chandler's last directive. But Jonah, still close, whispered the only words that cut through. Does that mean the house is yours now, Mom? I swallowed. I had no answer yet. Not really. All I knew was that something I never expected to hear, something I stopped hoping for, had just been said in front of everyone who once erased me. Not in private. Not behind closed doors. But here, out loud. For the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. They read my name like it was a mistake. Like the paper might have misprinted it. The long dining table felt more like a jury bench. White linen covered the surface, stretched and stiff, like everything else in the Chandler house, formal, untouched, prepared for occasions that were more performance than intimacy. Kellerman stood at the head of the table, legal documents spread before him. He wore the same composed face as always, like he'd rehearsed how to stay unshaken by whatever might come next. I admired it in a distant sort of way. Harper and Travis sat across from me. No one spoke directly to me, not since the video. They weren't angry yet. They were quiet. And that was worse. Jonah sat beside me again, silent but observant, his eyes flicking between faces, between lines of paper and lines of expression. He was reading more than just the words. Kellerman adjusted his glasses. As per the amended will of Mr. Benjamin Chandler, dated September of last year, the following allocations are to be made. A rustle of stiff fabric. Someone cleared their throat. A fork clinked softly in the kitchen 2 rooms away. Otherwise, it was still. To Mr. Travis Chandler, Kellerman began, a collection of fishing rods and tackle boxes from the lake house garage. And 1 antique rifle, circa 1901, to be held for display only. Travis blinked. That's it? To Ms. Harper Chandler, Kellerman continued, the jewelry chest belonging to your mother, currently stored in the attic trunk. And her recipe box, marked in your mother's handwriting. Harper said nothing. Her mouth opened for a second, then closed again. Kellerman glanced briefly at the next page, then looked up at me. To Ms. Eliza Chandler, he said, deliberately, the full legal title, unencumbered, to the Chandler family estate, including the main house, the back acreage, and the lake property, along with any remaining financial holdings attached to said properties. There are no liens or debts remaining. It was the way he said it, without hesitation, without apology, that made it real. No one else in the room breathed for a beat. I heard it all, but I still couldn't quite accept it. My name had come out of his mouth, not as an afterthought or charity, but as the main clause. The center of the sentence. The sentence I never expected to exist. Across the table, Harper's fingers tightened around her napkin. Travis leaned forward, elbows on the table. There must be, I don't know, a way to contest that, right? I mean, if this was a sudden change. There is nothing sudden about it, Kellerman said firmly. It was notarized, witnessed, and reviewed multiple times over the past 6 months. Your father was of sound mind. But he was sick, Harper hissed, her voice finally cracking. He could have been confused. Or pressured. I didn't speak. Jonah reached under the table and touched my wrist lightly, his small way of reminding me I didn't have to answer. Not to that. There is no confusion here, Kellerman replied. Furthermore, the estate has been fully paid off by Mr. Chandler before his passing. There are no liens, debts, or contested assets. There is, legally speaking, nothing left to fight over. Silence dropped like a stone. Travis leaned back. The color in his face shifted, not flushed, but pale. Harper pressed her lips into a cold smile. This isn't over, she said, turning her gaze to me like a slow blade. You don't get to come back after a decade and act like family. I met her eyes. Calmly. I didn't smile. I didn't flinch. I simply said I never stopped being family. You just stopped seeing me. She stood suddenly, her chair sliding back with a scrape that echoed in the room. But she didn't leave. Not yet. Kellerman quietly folded the papers and returned them to his leather folder. If there are no further objections, he said, addressing no one in particular, I'll have the deed prepared for signature this evening. I nodded once, still half waiting for someone to wake me from whatever dream this was. But it wasn't a dream. It was a strange kind of justice, a quiet, still one. The kind that didn't come with cheers or grand speeches. Just the truth, finally read aloud. After everyone had left, Kellerman lingered. He opened the drawer of my father's old desk, the one no one ever dared open unless they were told to. Inside, among the papers and pens, lay something small and familiar. He pulled it out gently, held it in both hands. It was a tiny clay bird, chipped at the tail, painted in uneven streaks of blue and yellow. I'd made it when I was 7. Gave it to my father one Christmas. He never said much about it. But here it was. Still here. Still in the drawer he locked himself. Kellerman didn't say a word. He just placed it in my palm and nodded. The key was taped to the back of the photo frame, one of the few still showing me. It was a picture from my college graduation. I hadn't even remembered we'd taken one that day. My father had stood stiffly beside me, wearing the same gray blazer he wore to every church function and school recital. I was holding my diploma. He was holding nothing. The frame was wedged behind a stack of hymnals in the study, its edges worn. I only found it because I knocked a book over, and when I reached down to pick it up, the frame slid out behind it. The key was tiny, gold, taped with a strip of yellowing Scotch tape. There was no label, but I knew. I hadn't been in the attic since the night I left. The stairs creaked in the same rhythm I remembered, 3 quick steps, then the long groan of the board that always made me flinch. Jonah followed behind, careful with each step. He didn't ask questions, just looked around like he was trying to memorize every smell and shadow. The attic smelled like cedar and thyme, like forgotten memories pressed between old newspapers and mothballs. Sunlight filtered through a dusty skylight, cutting the dimness into strips of light. The floor was covered with cardboard boxes, some labeled in fading black marker, others stacked with no label at all. A rocking chair sat under a quilt, threadbare and folded neatly, like someone had meant to return and never did. I turned the key in the padlock on the old trunk. It clicked. Inside were dozens of items, some expected, some not. A cassette recorder, still wrapped in its original packaging. A bundle of letters, tied with a green ribbon I recognized as the one from my childhood Easter dress. Several black and white photographs I'd never seen before, my mother laughing in a field, holding my hand when I was too small to remember. At the very bottom, a leather-bound notebook. I opened it. It was my father's handwriting. Tighter than in the funeral letter, more deliberate than in the legal documents. The first entry was dated about a month after I'd left. Saw Jonah in the paper today. School art contest. Won first prize for a picture of a dog with 3 legs. Eliza's boy. Another page. Sent Wallace to check on her. Told him to bring groceries if she looked too thin. The entries continued, scattered thoughts, none of them structured like a real diary. Just moments. Moments I didn't know he'd collected. Heard she started bookkeeping for that law firm. Smart girl. Always was. I keep the bird she made in my drawer. Blues faded. Still whole. I stopped reading. My hands trembled. I didn't cry right away. Not until I saw the sketch. It was folded between 2 pages. A pencil drawing of the house from above, like an architect's view. On the second floor, over what used to be the sewing room, was a square labeled in bold, messy handwriting, Eliza's study. He'd drawn a bay window in it. I traced the lines with my finger. It wasn't the drawing that undid me. It was the name. My name. Still remembered. Still written, even after I'd been erased in every conversation, every photograph in the hallway. Jonah was crouched near another box, looking through old letters with childish curiosity. He spotted the sketch in my hand and stepped closer. Did Grandpa draw that? I nodded, my voice stuck somewhere between heart and throat. Jonah's eyes lingered on the penciled label. So, does that mean he wanted you to come back? Like, to stay? I looked at my son, standing in the attic of a house I once ran from, now asking if it could be ours. He touched the edge of the paper gently and whispered, "Can we really stay here, Mom?" The light from the skylight shifted across his cheek. For the first time since we'd arrived, I felt the house soften around us. Not because it welcomed us, but because it had been waiting. The Saturday market was still held in the lot behind the Presbyterian church, tucked between the gravel drive and a crooked row of elm trees. I remembered the smell of fresh bread and wet earth even before we reached the stalls. It hit me like a tide, familiar, heavy, and just a bit sour under the sweetness. Jonah walked beside me, his canvas bag bouncing lightly at his hip. He'd insisted on carrying it himself. I didn't correct his proud stride, though he still had no idea what a turnip was or why folks paid $5 for heirloom tomatoes. We passed the honey stand where I'd once won a pie baking ribbon. The woman behind the jars blinked at me like she wasn't sure whether to smile or pretend she hadn't seen. Her eyes flicked to Jonah, then down to the cash tin. "Morning," I offered gently, the way you test ice before stepping forward. She hummed, not looking up. Jonah tugged at my sleeve. "Do they know you?" "They think they do," I said, then regretted it. He didn't need that kind of answer, not yet. We moved slowly through the rows, past jars of apple butter, stacked soap bars in paper sleeves, cinnamon bread still steaming under towels. Every few steps, another glance, another polite nod, sometimes a muttered greeting that didn't rise above the hum of small-town memory. At the pie stand, I stopped cold. There, beside the pecans and strawberry rhubarb, was a peach pie. My recipe. I didn't need to taste it. I could tell from the crust's scalloped edge and the little leaf cutouts along the rim. Someone had copied it. Or kept it alive, depending how you looked at things. Jonah leaned in. "That yours?" "It was," I whispered. Long time ago. Still good, a voice said from behind. I turned to find Wallace Boone, dressed in his usual tan work coat, hands tucked into the pockets like he'd been waiting. He nodded once. Didn't expect to see you here this soon, he said. Thought you might need more time. I needed peaches, I answered. We both smiled. That old kind of smile that forgives more than it admits. Wallace shifted his weight. Don't explain yourself, Eliza. People write the story they want. You don't owe your ink. Jonah looked up at him. Do you know my grandpa? I knew him better than he thought I did, Wallace said, eyes soft. Your mama too. We moved past the booth, and an elderly woman sitting behind a table of pickled okra reached out to touch my arm. Her grip was gentle but firm. Your father, she said, voice brittle like wine through leaves. He used to come here every month. Bought my pickles even when he didn't like 'em. Always asked if you'd come back yet. Never stopped. I nodded, lips pressed thin. Gratitude mixed with grief, like someone had tugged a bandage off and found the wound already scarred. Just then, a small voice from across the crowd piped up, Hey, it's Teacher Jonah. A little girl ran up, maybe 6 or 7, clutching a squash in both arms. You taught us how to draw dogs, she beamed. Jonah grinned, sheepish. Just helped at the library last week, he mumbled. But the ripple had already started. 2 women by the herb stall glanced over. A man paused mid-sip from his coffee. Eyes darted from Jonah to me, suspicion brewing where curiosity lingered. One woman whispered something I didn't catch, but the tone landed sharp. I knew that sound. It was the same tone folks used to say, bless her heart, when they meant the opposite. He's a sweet boy, the old pickle vendor murmured, sensing it too. Don't let their rust rub off on your shine. I gave her a grateful nod, then turned toward Jonah. He looked uncertain now, like he'd done something wrong just by being liked. Before I could comfort him, the air shifted. A hush spread like static as Harper walked into the clearing. She wore a slate blue dress, hair tied up, makeup careful, not too formal, but calculated enough for Sunday morning perfection. She didn't smile. Her gaze swept over the booths, landed on me, and paused. The crowd noticed. Eyes followed her like tide trailing moonlight. She didn't say a word. Just walked closer, step by deliberate step, until we stood 3 feet apart across a table of zucchini bread. Then she nodded. Slightly. Not warm. Not kind. Just acknowledgement. Like reclaiming face in front of witnesses. And then she turned to the next booth like I wasn't even there. Jonah whispered, Should we go? I didn't answer. My spine straightened, chin lifted on instinct. Not because I wanted to fight, but because I was done folding. Harper may have wanted the town to see her version of me. But I was here now. I had my name back. My son. My peach pie, borrowed or not. And the truth? Like Wallace said, it always shows up at the market. When Harper says family meeting, what she really means is, you're about to be judged. The call had come that morning. Short, polite, chilly. We should talk, Harper said. Tonight. Just us. I knew what just us meant. Jonah was staying at Wallace's. He liked feeding the chickens, and I needed my hands free. I hadn't asked what Harper wanted. I already knew. The Chandler living room still looked like it belonged in a real estate magazine. Plush beige couches, art books arranged just so, vases on the mantel that always seemed seconds away from falling. The air was too clean, like the smell of fresh bleach hiding old sins. Travis was already there when I arrived. He didn't stand. Just nodded and tapped a single finger on the edge of the glass coffee table, like a metronome counting down to nonsense. Harper entered from the kitchen, a mug in hand, sleeves rolled with precision. Her blazer had a single gold button, the kind that said, "I'm in charge," even when she wasn't. "Eliza," she said, all sharp consonants. "Thanks for coming." I said. No handshakes. No small talk. Harper placed her mug down carefully. "Let's not pretend this is easy," she began. "There's been a misunderstanding. But we're still family. That why you haven't called me in 10 years? I asked lightly. Travis gave a huff of breath, not quite a laugh. "That's not helpful." Harper held up her hand, like a courtroom gesture. "This isn't about the past. It's about perception. You inherited everything. The house, the land, Dad's accounts. People are talking." "Let them," I said. Harper leaned forward. "They're saying you manipulated him. That you came back just in time to take everything." "I came back for the funeral," I said. "Not the deed." Travis adjusted his cufflinks. "Regardless, it's not a good look." We were thinking, he glanced at Harper, a redistribution would help. "You know, show goodwill." My lips twitched. "Redistribution. Sell the land. Split it 3 ways," Harper said smoothly. "You keep the house." "That's generous." "Generous," I echoed. Travis cleared his throat. "We've also looked into some investment strategies. With the right moves, we could triple the value within 5 years. I nodded. "So you get money. I get memories. That your plan?" Harper stiffened. "Don't twist this. We're trying to make things fair." I looked between them. The living room hadn't changed in a decade. Same pale walls. Same rug that Dad used to vacuum every Sunday morning. But somehow everything felt smaller now. Duller. Like the truth had bleached the color out. "Fair," I said. "Let's talk about fair." Harper's nostrils flared, but she didn't speak. I leaned back. "Where were you when he fell off the ladder and cracked his rib? Or when the power got shut off one winter and Wallace had to loan him money?" "That's not true," Harper snapped. "He told me," I replied. Travis shifted. "We had our own lives. Jobs. Families." "So did I said. "But I sent help. Quietly. You know how I know he never told you? Because you never asked." The silence stretched. Travis began tapping his nails again. Harper reached for her mug, then thought better of it. "This isn't about guilt," she said. "It's about reality. People won't see you as rightful. They'll see you as the one who came back and took it all." I stood slowly. If he wanted you to have it, he would have said so. And he didn't. Harper stood too, her mouth a tight line. He was old. He was confused. He was clear, I said. "In writing. And in that video. You want to rewrite that too?" Travis looked away. Harper gave a small, tight smile. "Then I hope you like lawyers. You'll be hearing from mine." I stared at her for a beat, then walked to the mantel and picked up the tiny horse figurine I'd given Dad when I was 9. The one he'd kept, even after throwing me out. I placed it back gently. "Bring the lawyers," I said. "I'll bring the truth." And with that, I left the living room, their war room, behind. Whatever they planned next, I was finally ready. When a lawyer hands you a manila envelope, it's never a thank you note. I found it wedged between a stack of junk mail and a library newsletter, just a plain envelope with my name typed on the front in neat, impersonal font. My stomach tightened the moment I saw the return address, Commonwealth Court of Fayette County. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I walked to the old office near the front of the house, the one Dad used as a catch-all for bills and forgotten checkbooks. It still smelled faintly like lemon polish and paper ink. I sat at the desk, hands trembling slightly, and slit the top open. It was worse than I thought. Petition to contest the validity of the will of Benjamin Chandler, it read. Filed jointly by Harper Chandler and Travis Chandler. I skimmed the pages, each line colder than the next. Legalese wrapped around a single cruel claim. Jonah, my son, was not Benjamin's biological grandson. Therefore, they argued, the intent of the will was compromised by emotional manipulation and undue influence. I don't remember standing. Just that I was pacing before I realized it, the letter crumpled slightly in my palm. Jonah found me in the hallway, holding a peanut butter sandwich in one hand and looking concerned. Mom, he asked, you okay? I nodded too quickly. Yeah, sweetheart. Just adult stuff. He tilted his head, unconvinced. Is it about the house again? I tried to smile, but it didn't hold. Yeah, just some paperwork. That night, after Jonah went to bed, I called Kellerman. He picked up on the second ring, as if he'd been expecting it. They went through with it, I said. They're using Jonah. He sighed. I saw the filing. Listen, bloodlines don't determine inheritance. Benjamin could have left everything to the mailman, and the law would support it as long as he was of sound mind. But they're dragging Jonah into this, I said, voice tight. They're making it about who belongs and who doesn't. They'll have to prove coercion, he said. And they can't. The video alone shows clarity of intent. But I'll file a response by Friday. I sat in silence a moment longer, then thanked him and hung up. Later, while folding laundry, I found Jonah's sketchbook half hidden under a pillow. He'd drawn something new, a little house, 3 stick figures in front of it. One was tall with square glasses, Benjamin. One had long dark hair, me. And between them, a boy with a huge smile, Jonah. Above them, written in colored pencil, family. I touched the page gently. Tears welled up, not from fear but something fiercer, resolve. The next morning, Jonah found me in the kitchen reading the petition again. Are they trying to take it all away? He asked plainly. I hesitated, then nodded. They're trying to say we don't belong here. He chewed his lip, then said, we don't need to fight, Mom. We just need to show who we are. I looked at him, really looked at him, my son, the boy who never once asked why we weren't like other families. The boy who believed in home even when it was just a 1-bedroom apartment with a folding table. I turned toward the mantel, where Benjamin's photograph stood, one taken before things broke between us. His eyes looked directly into the lens, tired but clear. Then we fight with truth, I said. And I meant every word. No one said it to my face, but the parking lot always speaks. I'd pulled into the library lot a dozen times since I returned to Lexington. But that morning, it felt different. The cars were the same, but they weren't parked near mine. A quiet space of asphalt grew around me like a moat. No one said a word, no signs, no slurs, no shouts. Just distance. That kind of silence that doesn't need volume to hum in your ears. Inside, the warm yellow lights of the children's reading corner hadn't changed. The wool rug still had the same stubborn coffee stain in the shape of Arkansas. Jonah helped me stack books in a crate while I prepped for the morning's reading group. 3 families came in, but only one stayed. 2 mothers looked at me, smiled tightly, then whispered behind the tall shelves and ushered their kids back out. I didn't take it personally. Or at least I told myself I didn't. Jonah sat on the rug, pulling out Charlotte's Web. He looked up. Do they not like books? I smirked, brushing a loose hair behind my ear. Maybe they just forgot something. But he was too smart for soft lies. He didn't push. Midway through the hour, I spotted Wallace Boone by the checkout desk, hat in hand like always, even indoors. He nodded once and walked slowly over, slipping a folded newspaper clipping onto the table beside me. "Don't say I brought it," he muttered, glancing over his shoulder. "Just thought you'd want to know what he left behind." I opened it after the session ended, when the room had quieted again to creaking shelves and distant typing from the front desk. It was an old opinion piece from the Lexington Weekly, written by Benjamin Chandler himself, years ago. Titled, "What I Owe My Daughter." The date made me freeze. It was printed 3 years after I left town. He never sent it to me. The article wasn't an apology, not outright, but it spoke about mistakes and expectations, about how sometimes pride blinds you to love. He wrote, "Some debts aren't money. Some debts are what you didn't say when it mattered most." By the end of the piece, he'd written, "If you're reading this, I hope you know I watched from afar." And I was proud, even if I never said so. I folded the article with slow, careful hands. It didn't erase what happened, but it layered something new over it, like a second coat of paint that didn't hide the cracks, only softened them. That afternoon, while reorganizing the board by the front door, my eyes landed on a new card pinned beside the town events list. Family Heritage Festival, 1 month from today. The paper was crisp white, its border decorated with little acorns and handprints. Below it, in cursive, the tagline read, "Come celebrate where you came from." I stared at it for longer than I should have. Behind me, the librarian, a soft-voiced woman with silver hair and cardigans for every season, spoke without turning from her desk. He didn't know how to say sorry, but he did try. I didn't ask how she knew what I was thinking. In a town like this, people didn't need your words to read your feelings. They just watched. As I turned to go, I caught my reflection in the glass door. Same face, same eyes. But something inside felt different. Not forgiven. But maybe seen. They circled it in red ink like it was a family reunion. Kellerman laid the paper flat on the table, his gold-rimmed glasses sliding halfway down his nose as he pointed at the date. 1 month from today, he said, his voice calm but edged. Lexington County Court, 10 a.m. The bold red circle felt more like a target than a calendar note. I glanced at the paper, then at him. They really want to go through with this? They filed it formally this morning. Kellerman sighed, flipping through the thin manila folder he always carried. Harper's attorney claims you don't represent the spirit of the Chandler estate. They want the property split, 1/3 each. My hands curled around the edge of the table. Did Dad not represent the estate? Or is that different when he chooses me? Kellerman didn't answer that. He only nodded, slowly. They've also attached a motion to investigate the legal weight of the will video. It's a long shot, but still a headache. I took a slow breath. The hallway outside was quiet, just the occasional murmur of printers and clicking keyboards. Through the narrow windows, I could see the outline of parked cars, mine, Kellerman's, and probably someone watching to report back to Harper. He offered a folder across the table. I reached out, tried to settle, propose a trust in Jonah's name, maybe set aside a small land parcel. They refused. Flat. Of course they did, I muttered, flicking the edge of the file without opening it. It's not about fairness. It's about pride. Kellerman nodded again. And control. The worst part wasn't the court date or the legal jargon. It was the fact that I had to shield Jonah through it all again. That night, back home, I pulled a blank page from the drawer and tried to write a letter. Not a legal statement or anything for court. Just a letter to Harper and Travis from one sibling to another. I started with, "I know we all hurt in different ways," and got no further before tearing it in half. I didn't need them to understand anymore. I just needed them not to erase us. In the kitchen, Jonah was quietly lining up his pencils by color. The boy always made order when life didn't give him any. I walked over, placed a hand on his shoulder, and forced a smile. You want cocoa? He nodded without looking up. Is this about court? I paused, caught off guard. You overheard? He looked up then, brown eyes clear, unblinking. If they win, do we have to leave again? That question hit deeper than any legal claim. I crouched beside him, taking both of his small hands in mine. No, not this time. He blinked, hopeful but still wary. This time we stay. His shoulders relaxed, not all the way, but enough. He leaned into me like he had when he was 4, hiding under my coat at the bus stop. Later that night, as the house settled into silence, I stood at the front window, watching the moonlight stretch across the field Benjamin had once called too wild to tame. The grass shimmered in patches, interrupted by the weathered outline of the fence that Travis never mended. I whispered the promise again, not to them, not even to Jonah this time, just to myself. This time we stay, no matter what the law says. No matter who walks into that courtroom with polished shoes and paper-thin smiles. Because this time, I'm not running. He always said he didn't write well. But this one, it broke me. Wallace Boone lived in a 1-story home tucked just past the old Baptist cemetery, where the hedges grew wild, and the mailbox leaned like it had long since given up hope of being fixed. I hadn't been inside in years. But nothing had changed. The air still smelled like cedar and brewed coffee, and the walls were still paneled in that warm, varnished wood that reminded me of my childhood. Jonah was already outside, kicking a half-deflated soccer ball back and forth across Wallace's lawn, the sleeves of his jacket pushed up to his elbows. I watched him through the window while Wallace poured 2 mugs of tea. I ain't got fancy cups, he said, handing me one without a handle. But it holds just the same. I smiled. Perfect, actually. We sat in silence for a bit. The stereo in the corner hummed low with Ella Fitzgerald, the old song Don't Explain drifting like a memory between us. It wasn't awkward silence, more like the kind that settles when 2 people have too much history to rush into words. Finally, Wallace reached into the drawer beside his recliner and pulled out a folded letter. The paper was thick, cream-colored, worn at the edges like it had been handled more than once. I wrote this after Benjamin passed, he said. Didn't know if I'd give it to you. Didn't know if I had the right. But with what's happening, maybe it's time. I took the letter gently, not opening it just yet. He asked me to send money, Wallace said, eyes on the window, every few months. Called it For Dignity. Said if you ever knew where it came from, you'd never cash a cent. I figured it was him, I said quietly. But I never asked. Wallace nodded. He wasn't proud of what he did. But he never stopped keeping watch. Read everything he could find about you and Jonah. Asked folks at the post office. Even the grocer. Said he didn't deserve to ask you direct. I finally unfolded the letter. The handwriting was unmistakably Wallace's, blocky, uneven, sometimes smudged. But the words were clear. To whom it may concern. I am writing to state clearly and under oath, should it be needed, that Benjamin Chandler told me himself on more than one occasion that his daughter Eliza was to inherit the house and land. Not out of charity, but because he believed she had earned it. She did right by me, he said once. Even when I couldn't do right by her. He told me she was the best of us. I just didn't see it in time. If this letter is used in court, let it stand as my statement of truth. I do this not for Benjamin, But for Eliza, who I've watched walk a harder road with more grace than most men I know. Sincerely, Wallace H. Boone. By the time I got to that last line, she was the best of us. My hands had started to tremble. Wallace cleared his throat and looked down at his hands. I'm no lawyer, but if they want someone to speak, I'll be there. I owe your father that, and I owe you even more. I folded the letter carefully and looked up at him. Why now? I asked. Why step into this when you could stay out of it? He leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking under his frame. Because friendship is one thing, he said. But respect? That's earned. And you've earned mine 100 times over. Through the open window, Jonah's voice floated up. He was laughing, carefree for once. That sound steadied me more than anything else. I glanced at the folded letter in my lap, then back at Wallace. Then let's make sure everyone sees it now. The music in the background hummed louder for a moment, as if to punctuate the promise. This fight wasn't just about dirt and deeds anymore. It was about finally being seen. There's something holy about silence, until it's your whole family waiting to speak against you. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined. No dramatic wooden railings or gavel bangs, just a scuffed linoleum floor, a humming air conditioner that didn't quite work, and a judge in a short-sleeved button-up who looked more like a grocery store manager than someone who could change our lives with a sentence. Jonah sat quietly behind me, feet barely touching the floor. Kellerman had told him he didn't need to be here, but he insisted. You shouldn't be alone when they say it all out loud, he'd whispered this morning. Harper sat across the aisle in a crisp navy blazer, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Travis leaned back, trying to appear casual, but the tapping of his foot betrayed him. Their lawyer, a man with a too shiny tie, adjusted his papers with all the confidence of someone who believed money made truth. The judge looked up. Let's proceed. Their lawyer stood first. He spoke about bloodlines, about the integrity of a family name. Ms. Eliza Chandler left this town 10 years ago. She had no contact, provided no care for her father in his final years. Her son, Jonah, is not biologically related to Mr. Chandler. We submit this undermines her claim to the estate. I didn't react. Neither did Jonah. Then Wallace was called to the stand. He rose slowly, hat in hand, walking with the limp age had given him, but dignity never let show. When asked to speak, he cleared his throat once, then placed a folded paper in front of him. I knew Benjamin Chandler for over 40 years, he began. I was there when Eliza was born. I was there when she left. And I was there when Ben sat on his porch 2 years ago, tears in his eyes, saying, I didn't just lose my daughter, I pushed her away. Murmurs rippled through the benches. Wallace went on, voice steady. He told me Eliza was to get the house. Said it plain. Said she'd earned it, not because she begged, but because she walked away when staying would have broken her more. He paused. I mailed her the money, as he asked. But I also kept that letter, because I knew the day might come when truth would be questioned. Kellerman followed, playing the video again. Benjamin's image flickered, his voice raw, thin but unshaken. You never stopped being my daughter, even when I stopped being your father, he said on screen. I took the stand last. I never asked for more, I said, keeping my hands folded in my lap. All I ever wanted was to be counted. Not for a house or land, but for the fact that I was still his child. I left to protect my son. And I stayed away because I didn't believe I was welcome. The room stayed quiet, only the hum of the air conditioner remained, like a distant wasp struggling against a screen. The judge leaned back, then looked to Harper's lawyer. Any further claims? He hesitated, then shook his head. "The video will stand," the judge said firmly. "The property remains in Ms. Chandler's name, as legally recorded. Case dismissed." I felt Jonah's arms wrap around my waist from behind the bench. As we stood, someone in the back clapped, just once. Then another followed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't theatrical. But it was the first time since I came back that someone didn't look away. Travis didn't say a word. He stood, jaw tight, then walked straight out without glancing back. Harper hesitated. Her eyes found mine. Cold, but this time, uncertain. I exhaled. For once, silence didn't feel like judgment. It felt like peace. The silence in the house was different now. It didn't hurt anymore. For weeks after the hearing, I still walked quietly through the hallways, like the walls might wake up and scold me for being there. But something had shifted. The echo of my footsteps didn't feel cold anymore. It felt lived in. Familiar. Like the house had finally exhaled. The Chandler living room looked different, even if no one else noticed. I had reupholstered the chairs with a faded blue fabric I found at a yard sale, and Jonah picked out the new curtains, ones with golden leaves that shimmered when sunlight hit them just right. The air smelled of butter and cinnamon. The oven was working overtime today. "Are they still coming?" Jonah asked, peeking through the front window. "They said 4 o'clock," I said, checking the clock. "It's only 3:52. He bounced slightly on the balls of his feet. "I hope they like peach cobbler." "They will," I smiled. "It's your great-grandmother's recipe. No one ever didn't like it." At exactly 4, the doorbell rang. Jonah opened it before I could reach the knob. 2 kids from the library walked in, both clutching notebooks and visibly nervous. "Hi, Miss Chandler," one said, eyes darting around. "Is this really your house?" "It is now," I said warmly, leading them in. "And today, it's a study and snack house. Come on in." A few minutes later, Wallace arrived, tipping his hat like always. He handed me a glass jar filled with peach jam and a thick, dusty photo album tied with twine. "Figured it should live here," he said. "Where it belongs." I took the album, turning it over gently. "I don't think I've seen this since I was 17. Benjamin kept it," Wallace said. "Even added to it." I set it on the coffee table, beside the bowl of sliced peaches and the worn-out cards Jonah used as flashcards when he was 5. Everything mingled old and new, sorrow and sweetness. Later, while the kids spread their books across the floor and Jonah taught them multiplication tricks with coins, I slipped into my father's old study. It no longer felt like someone else's domain. I dusted the shelves, opened the windows, and let the air inside for the first time in years. On the desk, I placed a photo frame. It was of Jonah and me, taken on the beach years ago, the only vacation we ever took. We looked sunburned and ridiculous, but happy. Then I added a smaller one. It was Benjamin, young, beside a tractor and a dog that looked half asleep. Something about placing them side by side felt right. As if everyone had a place on the desk now. The doorbell rang again. When I opened it, a woman stood on the porch, holding a small gift bag and wearing a cardigan I vaguely remembered from senior year. "Eliza?" she asked. I nodded. "I'm Nora. We went to high school together. I wasn't sure if I should come, but I just wanted to say I saw what happened. And I'm glad someone finally told the truth." I blinked, unsure of what to say. She held up the bag. "There's nothing big in here. Just a candle and some lemon bars." I figured it was about time someone welcomed you home. I stepped aside. "Would you like some peach cobbler?" Nora smiled, eyes soft. "I'd love some." As she walked in, I looked around the living room. The chairs were full, the air warm, the windows open. The house didn't feel like a shrine or a battlefield anymore. Funny how a wooden bench with your name on it can make a town remember who you are. Spring settled over Lexington like a soft quilt, warm enough for short sleeves, cool enough for coffee steam to linger in the morning air. The Family Heritage Festival always meant three things: bluegrass fiddles on a temporary stage, the smell of kettle corn everywhere, and enough gossip to fill a phone book. This year, it meant something else too. Near the park gate stood a ribbon-draped bench under a pop-up canopy. 2 brass plates caught the sunlight. Benjamin Chandler. Eliza Chandler. I stared at the engraving, fingers brushing the cool metal. My father's name and mine, side by side, no omissions, no asterisks. Someone in the Parks Committee had decided both stories belonged on one line. The festival chairwoman bustled over, cheeks flushed from directing volunteers. "Miss Chandler, we'd be honored if you'd do the ribbon." I almost said no. Then Jonah squeezed my hand. "Mom, it's okay. People need to see." So I took the scissors, silver blades gleaming. Wallace stood a little behind, hat in hand, wearing his best plaid. A bluegrass trio tuned up 20 yards away. Every squeak of a fiddle string sounded like nervous laughter. I cut the ribbon. Applause rose, polite, hesitant, then genuine. It rolled across the lawn like wind through reeds. Jonah beamed. A little boy beside him asked, "That's your grandpa's name?" Jonah puffed his chest. "That's right, and my mom's." The boy nodded as if that solved a mystery adults kept complicating. People began drifting closer. Mrs. Lacey from the pie booth pressed a small peach tart into my palm. "You remind me of your mama," she whispered. Mr. Grant from the hardware store tipped his cap. Faces that used to look past me now looked at me, and for once I didn't flinch. Later, bluegrass spilled from the stage while kids chased bubbles across fresh-cut grass. Jonah sat on the new bench, legs swinging, 2 library friends poking fun at his lopsided shoelaces. It struck me then. He was sitting exactly where Dad used to rest each afternoon, watching the town go by. The circle was complete in a way I hadn't known I wanted. Hot tears blurred the scene. I let them fall. They tasted less like grief and more like rain after drought. A couple approached, mid-30s, holding hands, unsure whether to interrupt. The woman smiled. "Your boy helped ours pick books last week," she said. "He told us you teach reading at the library." I wiped my cheeks, studied my voice. "I volunteer, yes." The man shifted a sleepy toddler to his other arm. "We'd like to enroll our son." He's shy with words. Their hope shimmered brighter than the brass nameplates. The magnolia tree rustled quietly in the spring dusk, its thick blossoms opening like they had all the time in the world. I sat on the porch, a soft throw over my lap, pen in hand. A worn journal lay open, page half filled with ink smudges and slow words. The kind of letter that wasn't meant to be mailed. "Dear me, from 10 years ago. I know you're tired. I know you think walking away means disappearing. But one day, you'll sit on a porch with your son beside you. You'll feel seen not because someone gave you permission, but because you gave it to yourself." I paused, letting the wind turn the page ever so slightly. The evening carried the scent of grass clippings and warm earth. Somewhere across the street, Wallace flicked on his porch light. A gentle flush. Our silent way of saying goodnight. The screen door creaked behind me. Jonah stepped out, balancing 2 mismatched mugs. He handed me the one with the chipped handle, the one that used to be Dad's. The hot chocolate smelled of cinnamon. "You writing again?" he asked, settling into the chair beside mine. I nodded, then smiled. "Just a note to an old version of me." He sipped carefully. Does she need to know anything else? I thought about that for a moment. Then I said, tell her forgiveness isn't giving in, it's letting go so you can hold something better. Jonah leaned back, his head tilted toward the sky. So, are we staying here forever? I looked out past the porch railing, over the field that separated our yard from the Chandler name. Once, that name felt like a wall. Now, it was just a place with history. We're staying, I said, where we're seen. The breeze picked up. It wasn't sharp like winter wind, or dry like fall. It carried hope, the kind that whispers instead of shouts. I folded the letter slowly, slid it into the back pocket of the journal. As I turned to close the book, the envelope I'd used as a bookmark fluttered off the side table and lifted into the air like a white petal dancing toward the lawn. I didn't chase it. I didn't need to hold onto every scrap anymore. Jonah scooted his chair a little closer. I reached for his hand, and we sat like that, watching the magnolia sway. Hi there. I'm someone who's walked this journey from the very beginning, with Eliza, Jonah, and even the ghost of Benjamin Chandler. And now that we've reached the end, I want to take a moment to reflect with you. This story wasn't just about a will, or a house, or even a courtroom. It was about something far deeper, the quiet ache of being forgotten, and the strength it takes to reclaim your place with grace, not vengeance. What moved me most was watching how love can outlive mistakes, and how being counted isn't just about inheritance. It's about being seen, respected, and remembered for who you truly are. Have you ever felt like Eliza? Like your voice didn't matter in your own family? Or maybe like Jonah, you've been the reason someone chose to stay strong when it would have been easier to walk away? If so, I'd truly love to hear your story. Leave a comment and share your thoughts. Even just a single word can connect us. If this story reminded you of your own family or brought back a memory you thought you'd buried, leave a comment with the number 1. Or let me know where you're watching from. I always find it beautiful how stories like these travel across miles and generations. And if these kinds of gentle, heartfelt stories speak to you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next one. There's always another story waiting. Sometimes it might even sound a little like your own. Thank you for walking with us through all 16 chapters. Thank you for listening, not just with your ears, but with your heart. I hope we meet again in another story. Until then, take care and remember, you are counted, too.